All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to our session this afternoon. My name is Carolee Oliver. I'm a board member on the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Land Trust, and this is my colleague here, my partner in crime, Curtis Wiley. He's the founder of the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Land Trust. Our presentation today, Driving Transformation, the Power of Land Trust in African Nova Scotian Communities. We'll be talking about the history of our community and in detail about our Housing Solutions Lab. We can't advance the slide. Yeah. Can we go back one? Yeah. Go back just one. Okay, perfect. So our land acknowledgement, we begin by acknowledging that we live in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, and we acknowledge that people of African descent have been in Nova Scotia for over 400 years, and we honor and offer gratitude to those ancestors of African descent who have come before us to this land. We stand at a place of reckoning and reconciling the African Nova Scotian pursuit for restoration of lands with a profound respect for the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq, pledging to navigate this path with empathy and a shared commitment to justice, stewardship, and mutual respect. So just to situate everything, who here has been to Nova Scotia? Who here is from Nova Scotia? All right, we're representing today. I love that. So our historic community of Upper Hammonds Plains, as noted on the sign here, is located 25 kilometers northwest of the Halifax Peninsula. All right, and we are rooted in history. So just so we can help folks understand how powerful this is, and strengthening our whole movement is building up our whole sector, right? So the very existence and identity of Black Canadians began in Nova Scotia, with the Black experience rooted in communities like ours, Upper Hammonds Plains. Blacks primarily came in three waves: the Black Loyalists, the refugees of the War of 1812, and the Jamaican Maroons. And in 1812, refugees from the War of 1812 were settled in Upper Hammonds Plains, as well as other free Blacks. They came here with a promise of land in exchange for fighting in the war, and those promises were never fully granted, and our community faced a number of hardships. However, we were industrious, we were driven, we were entrepreneurial. When our ancestors arrived, the neighboring community was primarily an industry of lumber. So we began by creating sawmills. They were powered by water back in those days. That was before, engines. And there were cooper shops, and everyone worked in the community. And the Wiley sawmill, which is Curtis's family legacy here, is over 200 years old. It was the longest running Black business in Canada. And pictured above, you can also see there was mills on Pokpok Lake, and we'll get to that as well. How many people knew there was segregation in Canada? Raise your hands. Perfect, all right. Well, in Upper Hammonds Plains, children were not allowed to go to the school in Lower Hammonds Plains, so our community built a one-room segregated school for the Black children in the community, and they affectionately called it the schoolhouse. So we still call that the schoolhouse today. On the bottom picture here is our community center. And what's really incredible is our community center is built around that segregated school. Like there's still a wall in there that was once that school. And our parents went to that one-room schoolhouse. So it really wasn't that long ago. All right, so there was lots of industry in our community, but there was no fire service. Our community was plagued by fires. Family houses were burnt down and built up numerous times. And because the fire services would not come to our community, in 1966, community members formed the first all-Black volunteer fire department in Canada. It was decommissioned in 2012 because the funding stopped from the municipality, but we have an exciting update about our fire hall. All right, so our community was granted a piece of communal land in 1855. It was approximately 1,500 acres, and it was used by the industries in our community. So in 1974, 365 acres of this communal land surrounded by the Pockwalk Lake was expropriated. And this was to make way for a water infrastructure site that would supply clean drinking water to a large portion of the Halifax County. And this is all in the name of urban renewal. So physical barricades were put up and community members were restricted from accessing the lake. And despite this water being provided to hundreds of thousands of people in our province, services didn't include Upper Hammonds Plains. The water mains ran directly through our back lines, but we did not have access to that water. And the argument was that it was a gravity-fed system and that it couldn't be pumped up the hill. Right? So after a lengthy legal battle, our community finally was granted access to the water after some 25 years. So as a result of the national housing crisis, urban sprawl pushed closer and closer to Upper Hammonds Plains over the past several years. And a place that would have never been entertained now became very valuable for spectators and developers due to the general use zoning and the as of right. So the zoning put in place for residents was for them to have a more open use, but it ended up being like a catalyst for exploitation, right? Over the last probably 5 years, there's been thousands of permits issued in our community. In 2021, we began and we led a rezoning process, which has led to amendments to the zoning in our community, and it was to restrict the zoning so that we could have more control over the developments that were happening in our community. And this was like our first big achievement with the land trust. So I will hand it over to Curtis. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Carolee. So before, I'm going to talk about the Solutions Lab, but before we get started on that, I just wanted to set the context about parcels of land in our community. So we talked about the Melvin Land Tract. It's actually broken into Big Melvin and Little Melvin. And so the expropriation happened here, and there's barricades that were put, so we can't actually access Big Melvin physically. And then there's a legislated protected watershed zone on top of that property. So we're just kind of set your context. We're going to be talking about this space near the end of the presentation. But like these were the 10 acres and a mule that our ancestors were supposed to get, right? These used to have names of our ancestors on them, and now they're kind of in a precarious title position. So there's opportunities for us, but there's not really legal mechanisms for us to gain possession. And so over the years, now only 38% of our community is owned by African Nova Scotians. And so with all that being said, this is a story about one community, right? This is Upper Hammonds Plains, but there are 52 communities that have unique stories just like ours. And you're learning more about them as they are coming online and mobilizing around this concept. But it's just so that you can center the scalability and the potential of this mechanism, this CLT mechanism, to create significant transformation, in particular for African Nova Scotian communities. So our community land trust, we've been mobilizing, and I've been talking about CLTs and communities for a number of years, but these are just some photos of us during the rezoning process, hosting community meetings. This is Carolee and our other board member at City Hall advocating during the decision. Yeah. So we have and you can see all the community members, there's children, there's youth. We filled council chambers for this decision, which was ultimately approved. But there's been a number of other things that we've been engaged in as well. And I wanted to showcase some of the reconciliatory relationships that we've done. You know, I showed you those gates that restrict us from going into the Melvin Land Tract area, the watershed area. That's the gates opening. I had never seen Pockwalk Lake in my 30 years of being affiliated with the community, right? So we started writing letters and building these relationships. This is us standing on the Melvin Land Tract, a group of us. our ancestors' land that we've never been able to access, really. This is today the fire hall that we mentioned. We've been fundraising and have completely, this is now going to be a arts and recreation facility for youth in our community. That's done by the UHPCDA. That wasn't by us, but I just wanted to showcase, this mobilization, this proliferation of hope that's coming from all the work that we do. And of course, we talked about the Liberated Land Trust Tour, and that's us with Miss Sherrod. So, the Solutions Lab, why folks are here today. I'm going to talk to you, so our Solutions Lab centered around a couple of key questions around membership, governance, and relationship with the Mi'kmaq. And so this Solutions Lab process, we worked with consultants, SHS Consulting, Courage Communications, which is a consulting communications firm in Nova Scotia, and CMHC on this project. And so we were saying, how are we going to start to deal with these big questions, right? We wanted to design a process that we would be able to, it would be iterative and that we'd be able to build on our ideas over time. And so we designed it such that there would be a launch event and then kind of 2 community follow-up sessions, a development session and a prototyping session. I should probably back up and say that Solutions Labs are typically 12 or 18-month projects, right? Ours was compressed into 4 months. So we had to think about what can we accomplish in this time. And we took a different approach. So CMHC actually joined our initiative. They had deliverables. And if Tamara is on this call, it was an amazing experience to be able to welcome someone into our organization and have them really understand and come to our community and be a part of the process. And so we were using this approach to be able to really deepen the engagement, and I'll talk to you about kind of the results of all of that. Oops. So we had 85 participants and over 15 hours of in-person workshops. This was in the winter during Black History Month, so you had to think about the context too to get this many people to participate. But when we launched the event, it was sold out. Well, the tickets were free, but all of them were taken. And we had a significant amount of people that wanted to participate in this, right? And so our 3 questions were access to land. How might our policies and procedures related to land conveyance reflect communities' needs? It was about governance, and it was about the relationship with our Mi'kmaq community. And so I'm going to have these slides to kind of show you what each stage was kind of about. So this was our launch event. So we had a meal, right? This is how we get people engaged. So we had a big meal at the community center. You can see me there talking to the group. And we were giving them this exciting update, explaining what CMHC is, what is a Solutions Lab, and we introduced these 3 potential areas. But we used this time also to start the workshopping. But people didn't know that part. We sprang it on them. But because we had them and it was exciting, we started to collect that initial feedback, right? And so these were the initial questions and that people had in the community. And we were using that to validate the 3 questions that we were proposed in the beginning. And so one of the major components of this was building a relationship with our Mi'kmaq community, right? But given the timeline, it didn't make sense for us to try to build an authentic relationship compressed into 3 months. So I put this slide, the full report is available on our website. You can go right on and get all of the information. But I just put this here to show that there are steps within that guideline that can help other groups that are organizing to start the conversation. And we have taken action. We did write letters to the 2 First Nations that are in our area, and this is a bit of an excerpt of the response that we received. So we're really trying to get a project together that can help us build a authentic relationship. It does mean a lot to us to be able to do that authentically, but we definitely need resources in order to start that process in a meaningful way. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the scenarios. So how we define, so the first kind of concept was about defining the membership, right? So we pose these questions. to become a member, you must have a clear connection to the community. What does that mean to have a clear connection, right? What does it mean to have historic ties? What other membership criteria should be considered? And then in scenario 2, it was like, what role might family play? What role might Black and Afrocentric cultures play? What role might cultural protection play? And then it was the third kind of scenario is how do we make a collective decision about the use of land? How do we ensure all voices of community are heard? And then in the last, it was how do we define intergenerational wealth? And what does it mean to have access in this context? So to start to test some of those areas, we basically determined that there was 4 priority areas. These are now the first session. So we went from the launch, now we're doing the sessions with the 85 participants. And we hosted it like a small kind of conference at our church in its new facility. So it was held right in our community. You can see the membership criteria proposed is on the board. So coming out of that, there were 4 areas, which is descendancy, African Nova Scotian identity, residence, like being a resident in the community, and a demonstration for care of Upper Hammonds Plains. One of the biggest things coming out of this is the development of this framework. This is our membership framework for our community. And we tested this model with scenarios, which we're going to get to. But essentially, this is the framework that a new applicant, a new member, will go through. So it's kind of like a Plinko game, right? Whether you're going to have basically 2 membership tiers. It's voting and non-voting members, and then not a member. And there's different ways that you can get through this. And I'm going to talk more about it. So in the final stage, we had that framework. We started to actually consider unique situations, which I think this would also be really applicable to anyone starting to test your community's thoughts around individual people and scenarios. So I'm going to have everyone take a minute to meet Nathan, right? So there was Nathan, there was Maya, there was Amy. Yeah, so there was different people, and we started to test people's thought process around specific criteria, being a newcomer, being a descendant, you can see the bolded terms, how much they're involved in the community. And so in our breakout sessions, the groups were starting to decide whether these people should be members, right? And then they did that on their own first, then they would get the framework and see if the decision that they made absent the framework matched them going through the framework. So that was kind of the activity that we did to test the model, all right? And then we got into other types of decisions about land in particular. And again, it was kind of this decision. So what we came up with was our shared values around this concept, which I'm going to also share. But essentially, right, we're really wanting to be community informed and community focused, right? We want these decisions to come from our community, from the members. And so it was so important for us to really go deep on these 2 areas. And that's what I hope that the work that we've done in our community can at least be a starting point for some of the work that all of us in this movement are doing. So we've come up with these values. In the report, these values are broken down. Every single one of them has a full page. So they're very thoughtful and thought through. But it's really important. You can start with those values and say to your group, like, should we have this one? Should we edit this one? It's a starting place, right? It's the membership, that's what we came up with for our community, but you can apply it to your own. And here is it kind of put into play here. I can't go into detail about the different pathways that we're using to gain title gain basically stewardship of land. I'm going to show you some examples. But there's this thing about tracing the titles back to our ancestors, which I'm going to talk about, purchasing, private donation, and access to government surplus, right? Which I think are all avenues we look for through to do acquisition. And then kind of aligning these different avenues with our shared values and which ones kind of most align with the community, right? So this is meant to show you how the values can be used to lead decision-making, absent going to community to vote for things, right? So our next steps. By all means, we did not finish everything in our solutions lab. I think we came out with more questions than we did answers in some situations. So I say all that to say we haven't even launched our membership. Right? There's still some work to be done there. But these are the steps, right? And you can see it at the end of the report. It clearly identifies what would be the next steps for us to really launch our membership. Of course, a lot of that is underway, and we have taken some action, like starting to engage with the First Nations, the Mi'kmaq in our community, exploring new funding opportunities, which I'm going to talk about soon, and some other characteristics. So, here's what I want to talk about, lessons learned. Yeah, I do, but I'll just go off the dome. So what made the difference, okay? It's the little things, right? So for us, it was, when we did our launch, it's really important for our community members to get physical flyers. So we printed, that's why we brought on a comms team, right? Even though they didn't do the door-to-door work that we did, they did all the materials. So we created a launch card. We went door to door to every community member, explained what was happening, gave them the card, told them what was going on. All of that creates buzz, right? It's not just about posting something on the internet. You really need to get out there. And these conversations that you have with your community members starts to build significant interest. And then the kitchen table talk starts. And I'm gonna pick the kitchen table talk thing up in a second. But so we had community members that we basically engaged as liaisons to help do the groundwork. We made sure that our community sign was updated for everything. So when people drive by, they see what's happening and it's changing often. I had notes, and I don't want to go off topic, but it's those little things in so between every single session, there was a card that went out, again, by this team. And it was questions for next session. And we gave them to everyone and said, talk to your family about these questions, right? And they were circled around this. So the kitchen table talk was continuing in between the sessions that we were hosting, right? Because we also needed all 85 participants to come both Saturdays, right? Because we wanted the same group to be able to build on the conversations that happened before. If somebody new was coming in, they wouldn't know everything we talked about before. So it was we needed to just keep this group engaged throughout these weeks, these winter months, during Black History Month when there's a lot going on, to continue to come to the different events. So it's the little things that matter, going out to community, making sure that there's contact, these flyers are going out, there's posts going out. All of those little things make a big difference in terms of keeping your community engaged and keeping this buzz going, right? So the other piece of it was that descendancy really mattered to our community. It's something that we needed to test, right? You hear about African Nova Scotians, and we talk a lot about our descendancy and how it roots us, right? But this really tested that in terms of getting a full picture. We had seniors and youth, a whole group of people engaged. These were also brave conversations. This was a learning point that we didn't plan for, right? This opened up some very deep, vulnerable conversations, which that was one of the big lessons, and it's in the report, about creating safe spaces when you start to talk about people's belonging in a community and whether or not they're part of it, because we went into adoption and children and, marriages, and certain people didn't know that they weren't that biological parent. It got really, you know what I mean? It got messy. It also brought us together. Oh yeah. And we went there. And there was seniors in the community, matriarchs who were married into the community, right? And then all of a sudden they're feeling insecure in a sense when we're openly, considering whether or not they're a member of this land trust. It started to make them feel like they weren't a member of the community. It's all those things that we didn't think about, right? Made people really vulnerable. So that was a big piece coming out of it. The next thing was about a member versus a beneficiary, right? So people being members, and so you have to break that up, right? A person might be a member, but might not be somebody living in the units, right? We had to separate that, right? If we have a single mother and she's white, right? She may not be able to be a member of the land trust, but if she has African Nova Scotian children and she's a member of our community, she could be allowed to live in the housing, right? So we really had to start to define those differences because they got really muddy, right? What's the difference between a member? What does it mean to be a member? Do you get a turkey for Thanksgiving? Like, those were some of the things we weren't sure about, right? And she's laughing because I'm like, we need to get turkeys for everyone that wants to be a member. But those are the real things, and I'm going to start to show you a little bit about what that means, but that's a really important piece to consider, right? Is it, members, beneficiaries. Those are two different things, right? And then a member inclusion process. So for us, excuse me, I'm getting dry because I'm doing a lot of talking. Yeah, thanks, Carolee. Right on time. That's okay. I'm doing good. So member inclusion process. I talked to Chi about this once because it said appeal process, right? And it seemed like G. But what we did some more thinking about this member inclusion process. So walk with me here. You go on through that membership framework, you don't become a member. But there are people in our community that are beloved, and this is not just, we can't just have this cut and dry thing. So essentially, there's a member inclusion process whereby somebody that doesn't make it through that general screening can go to the general membership and be voted whether or not, by the membership, full membership, whether or not they should be a member, right? So that's going to be a mechanism for us to kind of get past some of the exclusion pieces of that membership framework, right? Because there are going to be people that don't fit that framework that still become members of the CLT because the community wants them to be members of the CLT. All right? Another big thing. So what has this all done? I guess I'm going to start to kind of give you examples of what this has all done, but this Solutions Lab process really elevated the branding of our community, but also made us feel like we could really do this, and it just felt like a really uplifting propulsion forward for us and mobilization of community, and it has enabled us to seize bigger opportunities, right? It has enabled us to be able to have the planning and the ideas and the community behind us to go after much larger scale development. And I'm going to talk about some of those now. So in Upper Hammonds Plains, let me situate you. This is way in the back of the community, okay? This is Little Pockwalk Lake here. These are the types of developments that are happening, right? So we have, 400 or 500 units per here. I think there's 300 back here. These are townhouse style units. And these all got approved during the time when we were rezoning the community, right? So there was a window where developers could continue to permit sites as of right, and that's what happened. So when CMHC announced the co-op development program, I thought, wow, that'd be nice, but we're not there. And there's permitted sites in this area. So then we started to say, well, this site you can see here has excavation. It's becoming what they call pad ready, right, for development. And there was an opportunity for us to be able to purchase a site that's already permitted and construct the units, right, on that parcel. So we had this crazy idea, and these are developers we fought, right? But because of this way we were able to change public policy in our community, they needed us, right? They needed us, and there's been a dynamic shift in what's gone on in our community this way. So this builder back here, this company is a builder. This is a speculator. He doesn't build. He just permits sites, right? So the application that we submitted is to purchase this site from the vendor, and the builder on the adjacent site is actually going to construct the development. And so we submitted an application to build 136 townhomes. Yeah. Yeah. On this site, this was a permitted site. So all of this was already done. It's just a matter of us actually building it. And we successfully submitted that application. Yeah. Woo! Woo! Yeah. And so the units range in size from 1,076 square feet to 2,250 square feet. The rents it's middle income rent. They're set at $2,000. There's 8 larger units like these here, which it would be $2,250 per month. We also had to incorporate a co-op. We incorporated a new housing co-op in Upper Hammonds Plains as part of it in partnership with CHF Canada. We've partnered with the Community Transformation Network for property management. We have the builder, we have the vendor. It's just been a complete experience. It's stretched us beyond our capacity, but I've learned a significant amount in this period. And we have a really exciting update to share with everyone on this very soon about whether or not we'll proceed through the first stage of building this and making it a reality for our community. So we're so excited, okay? So that's one thing. Yeah, thanks. And it's like we're gonna be able to prove that this grassroots model, just this, prove that our grassroots organizing can lead to actual tangible transformation, right? And again, so the next thing I'm gonna talk about is this little Pockwalk site, okay? I've been advocating for this land, or to be able to use it for a very long time. And it's adjacent, so that's that co-op site. This is the builder site, right? These parcels of land, we trace the title. So these were owner unknown in a poor title position. And we have these communities in our Black communities, basically only, that have no title to them at all. And there's no mechanism for us because we can't use some of the government-led initiatives in our community because they're legislated. So these parcels are 70 acres of land. There's 5 parcels. It would actually give us frontage on a lake. We don't have any public access to the water in our community. And the week before this week, so I had written a letter to the government and followed up with the premier, like I was doing all this stuff. And literally, we got an email from the minister, like a week before we came here, saying that we can proceed with site feasibility and pre-development planning, and that they're going to fund this exploration and community design, which we had pitched for, but we couldn't proceed because we didn't have a commitment. So this is going to be another significant opportunity for our community. Yeah. Yeah. So the last couple of weeks have been really crazy. And it seems very surreal. But I think it's because of, I talk about the Solutions Lab, but all of these things and all of the movement that's happening in our sector, it's just all of this, I think, is because of the awareness and all of the things that all of us are doing. What one of us does benefits everybody, right, and accomplishes. So we're excited to have a community-informed, there's a whole community-based planning that's going to happen on these to imagine what can be there. And then our last thing is a solar farm project. The province announced a 100 megawatt provincial solar farm project, and trust me, I had no time for this solar project in the beginning. But we have a wind farm in our community called the Shabukto Pockwalk Wind Farm that was created, I think, in 2015. The same company that developed, and it's a successful project, it provides income in perpetuity to our community and funds programming. But now there's an opportunity for us to put in a 7 megawatt solar farm in our community. And so we're like reviewing a memorandum of understanding to engage with that. So Megawatt Energy is a subsidiary of the Shabukto Pockwalk Scotia Wind, which did that one. And so there'll be another, we're doing this large renewable energy project as well, in partnership with all of the other community organizations in Upper Hammonds Plains. We have the Upper Hammonds Plains Community Development Association, the Emmanuel Baptist Church, and the Melvin Land Tract Protection Society. And this is actually going to be situated on a portion of the Melvin Land Tract behind the barricades. through negotiating with Halifax Water. So I'm showing you these projects because we work so hard for so long, and I'm wondering if we're actually going to be able to make something happen. And I've never felt more hopeful than now that we can do this and we can prove this model's effectiveness, not only to change the lives of the people that we serve every day, but to be able to propel all of that forward and for it to proliferate into other communities, right? And so I'm just so excited to be able to share these projects. I thought about what happened, last year's session versus this one, and this has only changed, and really for us. We've been doing a lot of work, but these decisions have really changed what we're doing now, just in the last few weeks. And so that's it for today. I wanted to say that it would be really awesome if you can subscribe to our newsletter. When you do, you're going to get an automatic thing that gives you a meet the board bios of everyone that works on the land trust. And then we also have our merch here, and our merch is something we give it to community members. So when we sell it, it's just to offset the cost of. It's not something that we use to make money. It's to just kind of move our brand around, and people have really resonated with putting the shirts on. It feels like, they're part of this movement. And I just thank you all for being here today. And of course, I have time. I wanted to make sure that I had some time to answer questions, because I know it's a lot of information. So yeah, thank you everyone for being here, and we'll take some questions. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. You don't need a mic. Okay. I think they need it for Zoom. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Zoom. From the inception of the work to now, how long has it taken to get from, dreaming out loud to kind of where you're at now? And what was the catalyst?
Good question. So, we incorporated the land trust in February of 2022. But there had been a lot of work happening prior to the incorporation. But really, it's been the last 4 years, more or less. I started to consider the land trust when I was living in Nunavut during COVID. And I was trying to do something at home for my own community. And we came up with this idea because of the traffic, which was just a bellwether for all of the things that were happening, right? The dogs, because that was a big issue for our community members, because there was new people coming in, and they had dogs, and we have no public spaces, right? So they have nowhere to walk them. So yeah, it's been 4 years, and we're still all volunteers, and we do have 2 part-time contracted program coordinators. And they do support us a lot. A lot of this we wouldn't be able to do if we didn't have them. But there's still a significant amount of time and energy that's we put into this, obviously. So yeah, it's just been, and it's just a testament to how much people have really come online with this. And we couldn't have done this without so many different people in this room that have supported us in one way or another. Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, just about some startup capital, how is that for you guys? And fundraising now, what is that looking like for you guys?
Yeah, so we don't have any operating funding. It's just by grants. We started with a $10,000 grant, then we got a $40,000 grant. We have gotten probably close to $500,000 in grants since we started. And that the amounts have gone up, obviously, as we show that we can do more. The Solutions Lab is $250,000, right? So if I encourage all of you to consider whether you have the capacity to deliver one, but really consider getting one. And pitching for one, because it really starts you. For us, it helped us get a consultant to actually do project management right? And keep our project moving, and then we could just focus on mobilizing our community and being in the community and, you know, directing things in a sense. But yeah, we still don't have core funding. But, you know, if this co-op application gets approved, you know, it will operationalize the land trust, it will scale us, and we'll be able to work full-time inside of it and be able to contribute full-time to the sector, which is something we've been dreaming about for a long time, like many people here, and never knew when that was gonna happen, right? But it's looking like it's gonna be a real possibility for us. Yeah. Yeah, Josh?
Yo. I came to this conference hoping to get inspired, and I've just been inspired.
Yeah.
What a testament to, how communities really do have the capacity to dream up their futures and develop concrete plans around it. Incredible to see how the work is developed, and congratulations on your hard work. What a good investment. Like, CMHC contributes $250,000 and the community mobilizes to produce plans for their future that could see growth happen in a really meaningful, powerful way. Like, what a good investment. Like, the question is, like, how is this going to be shared? For, like, this story needs to go everywhere.
I know.
We need to hear it, like, in every little town and city in Toronto or in Canada. So how can we, how are you planning to share it? How can we get the message out to make sure that other people see that this is possible and maybe may start to do it themselves as well, to have these conversations? And then secondly, where's your conversation going with CMHC? Because it sounds like they've been really collaborative with you in an unusual way.
Correct.
And is that something that we can, is there any way that, like, the rest of us in the room can help to encourage CMHC through you or in support of you to do similar things with other communities? Because it seems like it worked.
Yeah, I'll break this one up. So the sharing, you know, we struggle with that because it's like it takes time for us to be able to, and we want to, but like we're trying to figure out exactly how. And it's like when I see somebody, I'm like, oh, let me give you an update. But it's like, how do you throw this together? And you know, so it's tough. I want to be able to, and maybe we can collaborate more on how to share it. I've been telling folks here, like, we need to talk about the co-op development program, but they're not understanding why I want to talk to them about it, I don't think, because it's possible, right? In regard to our relationship with CMHC, you know, I was involved in some projects that were not going well that involved CMHC, and I was nervous about, like, what their, you know, thoughts about us were, and I got invited. So in Africville, they were having a meeting, and Juanita asked me to come. She said, someone from CMHC is going to be here. We want you to come. And I was like, oh, they're going to be talking about building houses in Africville, which is like, there's a big gap there, right? So, but I was like, I'll go there and have the conversation. And then I get there, and it's like Romy and the board of CMHC. But I didn't realize that, right? And then they're like, why don't you present, Juanita? And I was like, sure. So I gave right, you can imagine. So I was like, well, I'll get the Google Slides up, and I presented to them. And there was something that happened that day. Yeah. There was a move that happened. And then, you know, before, we had already gotten commitment for the Solutions Lab at that point. But then there's just been, I feel like there's something, I don't know what it is. Right? Oh, thanks. And so when we were serious about the pitching this, we got assigned a specialist, and like the answer, like, you know, they supported us in a different way. And people don't, it's funny because now, you know, the developers the builders that we work with just can't understand what it is because they have never had that type of relationship. And, you know, they counted us out on this, and we still, you know, we're still definitely not quite there. It's hard to explain the situation that we're in right at the moment, but soon we'll be able to publicly, you know, talk about what the next steps of the co-op would be. Yeah.
Wink.
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
Yeah.
She's this lady over here.
Thank you so much. So
Hi.
great to learn about all your guys' successes.
Thanks for coming.
When you talk, how big is Upper Hammond?
Good question. Like in terms of residents?
Yeah, sorry, population.
Yeah. So it's kind of an offshoot from a much larger community, but there's probably only 800 residents, right? But now there's thousands of new people living in the community, so it's definitely not just a Black community anymore, but it was for hundreds of years. So there'd be like maybe 2,000 people, and it's a small community. But then Hammonds Plains, like the lower portion of it, is a growth node in Halifax that would have like probably tens of thousands. It's a very dense, suburban, lots of big, what we consider to be large buildings. Nothing like this, but like that, and lots of single-family homes. Yeah.
And so I'm curious about your population size and your door knocking. Like, how long did that take? How many man hours?
Yeah.
Curious.
No, it literally, what did it take? An afternoon. Carolee, she did a lot of it. Like 4 hours. So it's like going house to house, but it's like a community where, we know every single person too. And I know there's people here from other communities here that understand what that would be like. Exactly. And that made a big difference. I think that made all the difference, really, by actually showing up and saying, can I count on you to come to this meeting? Right? We have people engaged in stuff now in our community that have never come out to anything. And I'm sure we've all experienced what that's like. And it's like, I can't explain to you how amazing it feels to have like people wanting to be on the board that have never been engaged, never felt like either the dynamics of what was going on or never felt like they could show up in the community. And I never got into it on the slide, but we do talk about this duty of care, or this, not duty of care, but this care for the community and what that looks like. But there's so many barriers that prevent people from being able to care from the community socially. So that's still a big area that we need to go through. But thanks for the question. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you for sharing, and we've been hearing about each other for a while, so it's awesome to be in the same room. And I just wanted to say with the connection with the Mi'kmaq part, that like every other community, there's complexities, right?
Yeah.
And so people go to the band and think that's the connection with the community.
Yeah.
And there's the grassroots.
Yeah.
So just to say, from Women of First Light, let's look at connecting grassroots to grassroots.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and that's really enlightening because, that was the approach that we just thought was appropriate, but you're absolutely right. There's so many complexities in our communities, and it's been incredible to meet you. I've been hearing about you through CLT folks at home, so it's great to meet you. And yes, we'll definitely be catching up and connecting. Thank you for that offer. It means a lot to us. Yeah.
I have a Debbie Downer question.
Yeah, hit me with the Debbie Downer question.
After that, I feel bad asking it, but I have
That's
to.
okay.
So when you brought this to community, just because you've done a lot of work with engaging the community and keeping them engaged and asking, because you can't do anything in any community without the support of the community.
Yeah.
How did you handle pushback from community members that might not have understood the CLT model or might have just plainly been naysayers, because when people don't understand something, they fear it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did you navigate that?
Yeah, so a couple of things. What you're raising is really important. So when we started organizing, we were like, we need to do a community visioning session, right? So we took all the organizations, the UHBCDA, the church, the Melvin Land Tract, we all went on a retreat together, because what can happen is that you're stepping on other people's toes, you don't know people how they feel about certain things, you don't know who's supposed to be doing what, two groups are doing the same thing. So we went on this visioning session, we put, what does this group do? What does this group do? Would you rather be in this group to do this? It was all of that and getting on the same page, and it propelled me forward, because I always had that thought in my mind. Like, is someone all of a sudden, like an elder in the community, gonna say, well, no, that's something we want to be doing, right? I talked about the model for a long time, and the folks didn't understand what it was, right? I just kept talking about it, though. And then it just became this mobilized, like the zoning happened first, right? That really brought everyone out. We weren't even talking about housing. And yeah, like, so we got on the same page. That really helped us, right? We were transparent about kind of what we were doing and what was going on. And in our community, that hadn't been kind of the history about some of the things that were happening. So we tried to provide as much updates as possible. You know, it's tough though. And we had people, like when we rezoned, we had people that were upset with that. Like community members who would come to the zoning meetings and like stand up and say they didn't want the community rezoned, like right to the city. You know, so that was tough to manage. And then I would try to explain to them like what it meant and like what could happen. And since then, we've been able to actually, change, basically submit other public policy that will return as of right usage to the land trust, right? That we will be able to use the zoning that was so exploited by, because right now we're also, that zoning is also a barrier for us, right? So we have to like work to actually be able to do that. But I hope that, I got off on a tangent, but did I answer?
Did you always feel like you knew what you were doing?
No. No. I was just like, I feel like, and for a long time I was like, let's just get this piece of land and put a house on it. Just one small house on a piece of property. And let me prove that it's possible, right? And then it's like, fast forward, it's right. But that's really what and yeah, like for a long time people didn't think we were doing it. But when we didn't think it would happen, right? But then when we were able to get the lab and elevate, like when we were able to do the lab, and the other thing is honorariums. We paid every participant an honorarium, which was really important. Yeah. So the participants were compensated for participating. Those were like the first times they could that stuff had ever happened, right? And everyone went home with something. Like, it was just like we really loved on each other during that period too, right? And I feel like that elevated, really well-designed like thing happening in our community is just unheard of, never happened, right? And these really thought-provoking questions. And the other thing that I want to, I'm going back to this now. The other thing is pick a table lead for your sessions, okay? When you say that, when it's like, all right, somebody, you guys work amongst each other to figure out who's gonna share. And everyone's like, who's sharing, So that was another thing, like it's the little things. Like we set table leads ahead of time. We gave them an extra honorarium so that when people came, they knew who was gonna be the presenter. It's those little things that make a big difference because then the people can just share and they're not thinking, oh, is somebody gonna pick me to talk? Like, it's those little things. I had that on my list, so thanks for reminding me about that. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, Jane.
I know that you say that they're little things, but I think that a lot of that is like best practices for community engagement.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you have a section of your report that also speaks to that, and if not, how can we get some of those little things?
I know. I'm gonna the notes that are on the slide. Yeah, no, they are. Those little things are the things that really matter, right? To create a safer space, comfortable space. They're not in the report, but I will figure out a way to get those to someone that can make sure that everyone gets them. Because they're really simple things that make a big difference, right? Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jane.
Okay, this is amazing. I love the
Thanks.
design process and the facilitation that got to harvest a lot of the thoughts, opinions, and insights from members of the community. Love the membership framework. For those kinds of outputs that came out of the development or prototype stages of your design process, I'm curious if you felt like in that process there was a general consensus or there were actually quite a lot of conflicting opinions about things like the membership framework, and how do you navigate some of those potential conflicts or disagreements?
Great question. How did we handle that? We definitely had conflicting opinions. 100% had conflicting opinions. People were firm on this particular component of whether a person should become a member. But I think it was that like kind of iterative conversationing, like, people felt like they were really building something together. And I was like setting that at the beginning, like, we're going to create something that other communities are going to use, right? So we want to make sure that it's really good and all that stuff. But I think, people that were, I guess, rigid and perhaps in the initial conversation, maybe in some circumstances, came to some deeper understanding about, potentially what would be important and what wouldn't be. I can't remember exactly how we handled it. We took a lot of the feedback. So after we tested the model, there was a bunch of like refinagling to that chart as well. To that, that was a couple of different iterations to get to that place. And honestly, there might even be more once we start to actually put the people through it. And we haven't actually done that piece of it yet. So I guess, all that to say that we can continue to change it. I don't think we had a ton of like, I'm trying to think of like situations where somebody was like, we just absolutely can't deal with this particular thing this way. We didn't really have that happening. But yeah, people were more or less open to all the conversations that we had. Yeah. Does that answer your, okay, yeah. Sure, sorry, yeah, no.
I think we might.
One more, or are we over time? Okay.
We are over time. So
okay, you can give it to us.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention, at last year's AGM, Curtis presented, and to be honest, I think it blew a lot of people away because it exposed people to the history in Nova Scotia. And when you speak for Upper Hammonds Plains, and Curtis knows this, you speak for practically all of our communities back home. So that's a debt of gratitude that we owe. But what I...
Thank you.
But what I also wanted to mention was, because I've had this conversation with a number of people with regards to community response. Oftentimes we hear, I put it out to the community, very minimal. When you talked about door-to-door, I think it's a lesson that we all have to learn, that if you can budget funds for communication, administration, you certainly can budget to build capacity to go to door-to-door. Because getting folks to the table is one thing. Keeping them there is another. But we have to get community involvement. That's the sustainability piece. And I'm sure Josh can speak to that as far as Parkdale is concerned. But sustainability is what we're after. And I think that Upper Hammonds Plains certainly isn't going anywhere. It's not going to be moved off the map because of the fact it's got such strong community support.
Yeah.
So that's...
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Well,
can I just quickly say something? Big round of applause for Curtis and Carolee. You guys are so amazing. It's like such a pleasure to work with them and just see this project grow and grow and grow. So thank you for sharing with us.